March of 2013, I was sitting on the steps of my home. I was living in Helena, Montana at the time. And I was trying to work up the courage to make a phone call. And I was going to call this young, cute Montana native living up in Kalispell named Taylor. And I was feeling pretty nervous, but one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to be really clear with her about my intentions. You know, sometimes we blur the lines of what we're trying to do, and so I was just like awkwardly clear about like, hey, I want to ask you on a date, like, and then explained what a date was, like a romantic date. I'm not trying to, be a friend, like just a friend. I want to romantically, and I use the word pursue you. And so I work up the courage, and I call her, and I was like, hey, it was great to meet you. I was just wondering if you wanted to meet me in Missoula. I'd love to take you on a date. Click. No joke, Taylor hung up on me. So I was feeling very secure and confident at that point. And a little bit later, she calls me back and makes up an excuse, and the excuse changes every time. Oh, I was in the garage, or I lost service, or whatever, but phone died. Like, yeah, whatever. And she still makes fun of me for how I asked her to this day. She's like, oh, this Christian boy, he's using this word pursue. And Taylor's like, I never even heard that word. What do you mean you want to pursue me? What does that even mean? And literally last night, we're at the Zenner's home eating dinner and watching March Madness, and she brings up the story and makes fun of me for it again. And I'm like, sorry for wanting to honor the heart of a woman, And so she loves to make fun of me for it. But later she eventually, at least a little bit, came to appreciate the clarity of what I was trying to do. I may have done it in an awkward Christianese way, but what I was trying to do is I wanted to be clear about my intentions. I wanted to be not kind of muddy the waters of what was trying to take place. And so I wanted to be clear, not wishy-washy about my commitment, about my plans, about what I was trying to do. And I bring that up not so you can make fun of me, although you're welcome to, but because exactly that sort of wishy-washy, non-committal, 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing, a lot of us, unfortunately, do that with the person of Jesus. We do this 1 foot in Christianity where we live as sort of partially committed followers of him rather than fully devoted, committed followers of him. And today, in this passage in Matthew 21, we see that sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out Christianity isn't actually an option that Jesus gives us. We will have to sort of, to borrow a phrase from that awkward phone call, define the relationship of what we are trying to do with the person of Jesus and his options that he gives us. So if you want to pick up in Matthew 21, starting in verse 1. When they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus then sent 2 disciples, telling them, go into the village ahead of you. At once you will find a donkey tied there with her foal. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them at once. This took place so that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. Tell daughter Zion, see, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The disciples went and did just as Jesus directed them. They brought the donkey and its foal, then they laid their clothes on them, and he sat on them. Verse 8, a very large crowd spread their clothes on the road. Others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them on the road. Then the crowds who went ahead of him and those who followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in an uproar, saying, who is this? The crowds were saying, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. Jesus went into the temple and threw out all those buying and selling. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, it is written, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of thieves. The blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. When the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonders that he did and the children shouting in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they were indignant and said to him, "Do you hear what these children are saying?" Jesus replied, "Yes. Have you never read? You have prepared praise from the mouths of infants and nursing babies." Then he left them, went out of the city to Bethany, and spent the night there. I don't know what kind of church background you come from. I know we have people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and some of them celebrate Palm Sunday more intentionally than others. So you may be wondering, some of you, what Palm Sunday, what does that even mean? You know, I'm not a super traditional person. You could probably tell that based off how I'm dressed. But I grew up in a Lutheran church in northern Minnesota. And as a kid, I kind of thought, like, well, everything's tradition. And so maybe became averse to tradition and church calendar things. But Palm Sunday is just a beautiful tradition that focuses on this particular scene in the life of Jesus, this triumphal entry of Jesus going into Jerusalem. The first steps toward a week that would end with his life on the cross. You know, in John's account of this same scene, John 12:16, it says, "His disciples did not understand these things at first." And many of us, when we come to some of these things, we may not understand them either. So if you don't come from a traditional church background, you don't know what Palm Sunday is, we're going to look at three things to help us understand the significance of this scene and in turn, the significance of Palm Sunday. So we'll look at one, how Jesus came, two, why Jesus came that way, and three, what it means for us. So first, how Jesus came in this scene. To see the uniqueness of what's happening, we need some context. So up to this point, Jesus has been very secretive of his identity. If you look at Mark's gospel alone, it's amazing how often Jesus tries to remain hidden. Maybe you remember that from our Mark series we did a couple years ago. You don't, it's fine. But in Mark 1, Jesus commands the demons to be silent about his identity. In Mark 1, with the leper, it says this, "Then he, Jesus, silently warned him and sent him away at once, telling him, 'See that you say nothing to anyone.'" A couple chapters later, Mark 3, "Whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, 'You are the Son of God.' And he would strongly warn them not to make him known." Mark 5, "He did not let anyone accompany him except Peter, James, and John, James' brother. Then he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this." That's where they healed the dead daughter in Mark 5. One more for good measure. Mark 7, the story of the deaf man who had trouble speaking. It says, "He took him away from the crowd in private. He ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more they proclaimed it." So for chapters and chapters, even just in Mark's gospel, Jesus is more or less hiding his identity. Another way to look at it, though, is that he's in control of his timeline of when he would enter into Jerusalem. And right before this scene that we just read, he actually lets his identity be known. So in Matthew 20, this blind man is healed, and it says this, "The crowd demanded that there were two blind men, keep quiet, but they cried out all the more, 'Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David.'" So here he is called Son of David, the Messiah, and he actually doesn't quiet them. He doesn't give them strict orders like he gave everybody else to keep their mouths shut, to not proclaim who he is, to not let this be known. Instead, he just heals them. And then right after that, letting his identity be known, then he enters into Jerusalem, and it is not by happenstance. And then in verse 9, it says, "The crowds who went ahead of him as he enters into Jerusalem, and those who followed shouted, 'Hosanna to the Son of David.'" And then after the entry, the end of this section we just read, the children do the same. Verse 15, children are shouting in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David." So for the majority of the gospel accounts, Jesus tries intentionally to remain hidden, not letting his identity be fully known. But then we get here, and it seems like all of a sudden he doesn't care. And he lets people claim that he is the Son of David. He's letting his identity be known. They had been waiting for this coming Messiah that would come from the lineage of David. You may remember this in like 2 Samuel. David is told by God through Nathan. It says this, when your time comes and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up after you your descendant who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So him being called the son of David is a huge claim. And so that's how the scene is set in his entry into Jerusalem. And so on his way to Jerusalem, he tells his disciples, go ahead of me and get a donkey. And, this is a triumphal entry. We'll see more about that in a little bit. But can you imagine, why a donkey? Why a donkey? I mean, can you imagine like some other hero, going in on a donkey? You think, man, Braveheart would be a lot better if William Wallace wasn't on a horse, but a donkey, and he's like, they'll never take our freedom, as he's just sitting on this little thing. He probably could not have got his team riled up. They were already trying to run, but going on a donkey is a pretty surefire way of losing, right? And of being killed. It's a terrible war strategy. What is that? Oh, hey, Larry, you got a call from, just said healthcare. So I don't know. Hope everything's okay. So let's just pray for Larry this right now, Just want to extend a hand. No, going on a donkey, it's just too good, is a surefire way of losing, of being killed. Terrible war strategy, unless being killed is actually the way you win the war in the end. So Jesus comes on a donkey. We'll actually get to that a little bit more here soon. And so he comes with a donkey, and he comes with a crowd. Verse 8 said this, a very large crowd spread their clothes on the road. Others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them on the road. So they are doing these things. So Palm Sunday, cutting branches, laying them down, is an act, a tradition that is reserved for kings. So these crowds that come, that they go with him, they go ahead of him. So that when they get to Jerusalem, people are asking, who is this? And Jesus' crowd answers, saying, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. So he came on a donkey and he came with a crowd, finally letting his identity, again, remember he was secretive for so long, letting his identity start to be known. So that's how Jesus came. But why? Why did he come that way? One, well, to fulfill the prophecies in the Old Testament about him. Just to point out two here, Genesis 49 says this, the scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff from between his feet, until he whose right it is comes, and the obedience of the peoples belongs to him. He ties his donkey to a vine, and the colt of his donkey to the choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. So that a king is coming who will demand the obedience of the people, but he won't come on a stallion, he will come on a donkey, Genesis 49. Then one more, Zechariah 9:9 says, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion, shout in triumph, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So Jesus was fulfilling these prophecies that the Jewish people would have been very familiar with, not only familiar with, but anticipating the coming of this king. But there's more going on here too. It's likely, many commentators, scholars point out, it's likely that there was another man who would ride into Jerusalem to proclaim his authority, being Pontius Pilate. Because during the festivals and the time of feasts, when all the Jews would gather in Jerusalem, he would ride in, it was customary for him to ride into town on a stallion, not a donkey, a stallion. And they would say things like, here comes the Roman emperor. But if Jesus is fulfilling the prophecy of Zechariah, it says, look, Jesus, your king, is coming to you. So he's subverting what is customary for the Roman emperor to ride into Jerusalem and say, here comes the Roman emperor. Jesus is saying, it's not the Roman emperor that's your ultimate king. It's me. Who's your king? This was a revolutionary act. So if you're not tracking, think of it this way. So who won the Super Bowl this last year? Seahawks, right? And so imagine, they always do a parade, right, after the Super Bowl in their city. Imagine the Seattle Supersonics. I wish they should come back. The Seahawks, imagine the Seahawks parade. There's all this security, a huge crowd here to celebrate their victory. So they're there, but then another team shows up. And they're not on like anything fancy buses or anything. They're on these little cheap bikes. So like the New York Jets, one of the worst teams in the league this last year, say like their quarterback just shows up and he's riding in the middle of the parade on some janky old bike. And you would be like, what would your response be? You'd be like, what are you doing here? Like you were the worst team in the league for the most part. You could have your own ceremony, but not here. There can't be two champions. You didn't win, despite participation trophies and everything. But there can't be two champions. And this wasn't a tie. You weren't even in the Super Bowl, right? So coming to Jerusalem was a bold and dangerous statement. And both Jesus and his disciples at this point knew it. That he was challenging who was the true king. So Jesus was going into Jerusalem in order to be captured. He was going there to die. He was going there to be resurrected. He was going there to bring about the first Easter. He was going there knowing what was going to happen, and he was in control of his timeline. He was challenging the leaders of Jerusalem, claiming that instead he is the real king. I mean, you know that passage that we read of cleansing the temple, and we love that passage. We love to use it to justify us, losing our cool or whatever when he flips the tables. Anyways, it says, Jesus went into the temple and threw out all those buying and selling. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, it is written, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of thieves. Jesus is very particular in his timing. Jesus did not lose his cool on a whim. He was intentionally doing this because the temple was supposed to be a place for both Jews and Gentiles to worship. There was an outer court or court of the Gentiles where non-Jews were supposed to be able to come and pray and meet God. But instead of an on-ramp to meeting God, it became exploited for profit. And Jesus now comes in not being discreet about this anymore. He isn't trying to play it cool and go unnoticed. He is trying to elevate the tension of what is happening because he knows his time has come. Jesus is very much in control of the situation. He didn't lose his cool and he's out of control. He's in control. He knows exactly what he is doing. And the children, they start claiming that he's the son of David, saying, Hosanna to the son of David. And they get mad and they say, do you hear what these children are saying? And Jesus replies, yes. Yes. Have you not read, you have prepared praise from the mouths of infants and nursing babes? They're asking, do you hear what they're calling you? This is blasphemy. Aren't you going to correct them? Jesus quotes a psalm and basically says, they are praising me. And they can praise me because I'm not just a teacher or just a prophet, but I am the son of David, the Messiah, the Christ. So, why did Jesus come this way with the donkey and the crowd and everything right after flipping tables? He came to proclaim that he is the true king. Now, what does that mean for us? Not in Jerusalem, but here in Missoula, Montana. It means everything for us. By Jesus doing this, he's saying, look, I'm not just a good teacher or a rabbi. I'm not even just a miracle worker. I'm not just a rabbi. I'm the true king. I'm the Messiah. So either Pontius Pilate had to accept this claim of Jesus or reject it. And rejecting it meant death by crucifixion. So that's not him. Okay, we're good. He knew that this was going to result in death by crucifixion. So he confronted the leaders of Jerusalem. Is it? No, is it my phone? All right, guys, I'm so sorry. This usually doesn't happen. I don't know what's happening. If a sound person that's smart can help me, that'd be great. Oh, it was Sophie. Okay. Everything okay? Oh, okay. Hey, you made it on time. So, all that to say, Jesus intentionally confronted the leaders of Jerusalem, and not only the leaders of Jerusalem, but he confronts us. And like Pilate, man, we all have to make up our mind about who we think Jesus is. And how we answer that changes everything. We got to think, is he just a good teacher? Like we can take some moral teaching from him, not everything, but some things that we like. Is he just sort of like an advisor that I go to when I need a little wisdom? Is he sort of, I don't know, like a genie in a bottle for when I need a quick favor? Or is he king of your life? Is he the ultimate authority in your life? We talked about this a little bit last week, but if he is king, it means he's going to have authority over your life. He's going to ultimately call the shots. And we don't like that in our anti-authority age. You know, we don't like feeling like there's authority over us, but the problem isn't having authority, it's having the wrong types of authority. We all have authorities in our life, like we talked about, that we listen to. They might just be more modern than traditional. But do we have the right authority? Do we have a trustworthy authority? Do we submit to the proper authority, one who actually cares for us? Is this authority true, righteous, and good? So to call Jesus Lord was to say Pontius Pilate is not. It's to say Caesar is not, and it's to say you are not. But we have to make up our minds. Kyle Idleman, I love this quote. He says this in his book, Not a Fan. He says, the biggest threat to the church today is fans who call themselves Christians, but aren't actually interested in following Christ. He says, they want to be close enough to Jesus to get all the benefits, but not so close that it requires anything from them. If that isn't a proper diagnosis of much of the American church, we want the benefits of Jesus. We like some of the things he had to say. We want to go to heaven when we die. We like some of his moral teaching and framework, and he had some good things to say, but we don't want to do anything that requires anything really of us. You know, we've done more harm than good when we tell people all they have to do is just pray a prayer and then you can live your life however you want. We've created, as Kyle Idleman would say, fans, not followers. We've made decisions, but not disciples. You know, Matthew 16, Jesus said this, if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. That the mark of a follower of Jesus is surrendering to Jesus. It's discipleship to Jesus is an ongoing surrender to him. It's not a one-time decision and then we just coast. It's letting go of our idols and our sins and letting him be the ultimate king of our life. A.W. Tozer said this. He said, everyone who receives him must surrender to his authority. For to say we receive Christ when in fact we reject his right to reign over us is utter absurdity. So Jesus comes to us, he comes to you, and he doesn't give you the option of him being just a good advisor in your life. He comes with the option of him being the king of your life and reigning over you as your ultimate authority. Jesus didn't say, well, come follow me and just take a few of my good ideas. He said, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. So Jesus' invitation for them and for us is to follow him, deny ourselves, surrender to him, to find our true life in him. So to submit to him as king is to see that he is actually the best authority figure we could ask for. Jesus offers us true, abundant life, but it comes through this surrendering our own life to him, surrendering how we feel like life ought to go. So the password to this abundant life is actually denying ourselves in surrender. And many of us, we want to skip that part and like get to the good stuff, get to the abundant life, but we don't want to surrender our life in order to receive that abundant life. We want to kind of walk around the gate, hop the fence, whatever, to the abundant, rich life. It's like, I want to follow Jesus, but I also want my own freedom, my own autonomy to do whatever I want, whatever feels good. And we don't surrender our lives to Jesus as our king because ultimately we don't trust that his rule and reign in our life is really for our good or for our joy. Why else would we reject him? If we really think, he is God and we don't surrender to a life of surrender to him, you got to ask why. And I think if we're honest, the reason is we don't think it's going to lead to the good life. We've bought the lie that the good life is not found near Jesus, but away from Jesus. We don't think he's trustworthy. We don't think he leads us to green pastures. So we grasp on to anything that we can hold on to as our own to maintain sort of a sense of control of our life. Because deep down, we don't trust that he is for our good. But if we think that, it shows we actually don't understand Palm Sunday. In John 12, it says this, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus was, the one Jesus has raised from the dead. So we're looking at John's account here. So 6 days before the Passover. In the Jewish calendar, this would have been Nisan, Nisan, the 9th. So 6 days before the Passover. Then a few verses later, it says the next day, in verse 12, the next day, when the large crowd that had come to the festival heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So the next day would have been Nisan the 10th. Okay, what does that matter? Well, let's look at Exodus 12. It says this, tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, Nisan 10th, they must each select an animal of the flock according to their father's families, one animal per day. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male, and you may take it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. So on Palm Sunday, do you see what's happening here? The same day that Jews were supposed to bring an unblemished lamb, the same day in the calendar just happens to be the same day Jesus enters into Jerusalem, where he would soon be slaughtered. So do you see what he's saying? He's not only saying, I'm the one true king, which he is. He's also saying, I'm the one final sacrifice for sins. So, yes, Jesus demands to be on the throne of your heart and your life if you want to follow him. But he also offered himself as a spotless lamb that would go to Jerusalem to be killed, not because of anything he has done wrong, but because of our own sin, our own injustice. So if we're looking for a king or an authority figure to surrender to, what other king leaves the throne to be sacrificed for his enemies? I mean, if Jesus wanted to ride into Jerusalem on a horse, he could have, but he didn't. He didn't come to slaughter the leaders of Jerusalem or to defeat them, to forcefully conquer their city as the disciples had hoped he would. His disciples, they wanted to be liberated from the authority of Rome. Jesus wanted them instead to be liberated from their sin. Tim Keller said this. He said, "Sin is servants putting themselves in the place of the king. Salvation is the king putting himself in the place of the servant." So if this king, this Jesus who is claiming to be the one true king, is willing to die for me, I don't know about you, but I am willing to surrender everything to an authority figure like that. And trust that doing so actually leads to the best, most joyful version of life possible. The Christian life is not this, oh, woe is me, life's miserable. Think about a child who thrives under healthy parenting. Think about an athlete that flourishes under a good coach, or an employee that blossoms under a trustworthy boss. We are led towards human flourishing, not away from it when we let Jesus rule our lives. So what if your deepest joy that we all want is not found in rebellion of him, but in submission to him? In 397 AD, there was a man named Augustine who lived in North Africa, and he wrote this book, kind of a memoir prayer called Confessions. And he spends so much of his time in rebellion against God. And the prayer of his mother is that he would come to the faith, but he's living this pagan-style lifestyle. And at some point, he records this in his story, he has a radical conversion, and he finally gives his authority to God. And he writes this. I love this quote. He says, "That is the authentic happy life, to set one's joy on you, ground it in you and caused by you. That is the real thing, and there is no other. Those who think the happy life is found elsewhere pursue another joy and not the true one." The good life is found in Jesus, not away from him. We resist letting Jesus be the king of our life because we think he won't be a very good king. We think we'll be a better king. But the reality is he didn't just make us these blind, helpless servants. He made us into sons. And who wouldn't want to be a son or daughter of royalty? I mean, you really think you could create a better life on your own than being a son or daughter of the king and creator of the universe? I surely could not. So under the proper authority, humanity actually flourishes. And there's no authority more trustworthy than somebody who is willing to lay their life down for you and for your good. He comes to you gentle, but he does say at some point you need to make a decision. Either I am king of your life or I'm nothing. The Christian life is all or nothing. He's not interested in being anything less than a king and a savior and Lord. He doesn't just want to be a moral compass for you or a good teacher or just a genie when we need a quick favor. Like that story of Taylor and I at the beginning, either we're doing this thing or we're not. I'm not interested in this middle ground relationship, and Jesus isn't interested in a middle ground relationship either. So at some point, we need to make up our minds about who he is. And if you're here and you're genuinely just exploring Jesus, exploring faith, I applaud you and I say, take your time. But just know at some point you will have to make up your mind. You can't just take the good things from him. You either surrender to him as king or not. So the invitation of Jesus is nothing less than a call to surrender everything to him. But the uniqueness of this king is that he was willing to die for you and for your mistakes, not for his. So to stop trying to play God and be king of our own little, sliver of the universe, and instead to hand over the keys and the rights to him and say, your way is better. At some point, we have to decide. So again, if you're exploring faith, I'm not coming at you. Take your time. It takes time. But I am talking to you. If you've been here at church for years, months, years, or decades, and you're still kind of living this half foot in, half foot out Christianity, at some point we got to make up our mind. What are we doing here? One thing I love about being a pastor in Missoula, there's lots of things I love about being a pastor in Missoula. I don't think I would be a good pastor in like the Bible Belt. The thing I love about Missoula, you got the Bible Belt down south. I call the Pacific Northwest Satan's suspenders. I don't know. We'll see if it catches on. But the thing I do love about Missoula is a lot of people aren't indifferent to Jesus. A lot of people have very strong feelings about Jesus and Christianity. Many for it, many against it. But what I love is that even those that are against it will tell you, they don't pretend. They don't play this 1 foot in, sort of 1 foot out religion. They may be all out, but at least they're all something. They'll either follow him with everything or hate him for everything, and they'll tell you about it. But maybe they're actually closer to understanding Palm Sunday than many of us are, because they realize it's an all or nothing transaction. Tim Keller, again, in his book, Jesus the King, he says this: either you'll have to kill him or you'll have to crown him. The one thing you can't do is just say, what an interesting guy. Please don't try to keep Jesus on the periphery of your life. He cannot remain there. Give yourself to him. Center your entire life on him and let his power reproduce his character in you. So at some point, we need to decide, who is this man? If he is the Son of David, the Messiah, the one true King, then we need to reckon with that. Worship team, you can come back up. So on Palm Sunday, Jesus came to Jerusalem, and he comes to us here this morning, and he asks, who is your true king? Missoula, who is your true king? And the worst thing we can do is be indifferent. At some point, we have to make a decision. Who is Jesus in your life? Is he king of your life, or are you king of your life? Because the invitation from him is to willingly surrender every part of your life, more and more so, to the one true King, and to trust that under his kingship is actually where you will flourish. Because this King, again, is like no other leader. He offered himself as a sacrifice, a final sacrifice, to die, not just for their mistakes in the first century, but for ours. So the question is, what are you going to do with him? Who is your true King? Let's pray, and then we'll stand together for worship. Why don't we stand now and we'll pray. If you're comfortable, I'm just going to invite you, if you want to just stick out your hands in an act of receiving and surrendering. Jesus, this morning, we just recognize who you are. You're not just a good teacher. a good rabbi, a genie, somebody that had some good morality that we like. You are presenting yourself as king. And I pray wherever we are this morning, whether we are still figuring out what we believe about you or we've been following you with one foot in for decades, that you would meet us where we are. And you would call us to surrender as a son or daughter to you in authority like no other, who willingly rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, knowing what is coming for him. And you didn't just come as a king, but a savior. One to take away the sins of the world, no matter the injustice that we have perpetuated in this world, no matter the sin that we have done against not just humanity, but you. God, you came and died for us who were your enemies, so that we can be reconciled, not just as a slave or a servant, but as sons and daughters of the one true King. So we just surrender again our lives to you, because it's not away from you that true life is found, but in you. So meet us where we are this morning and help us live this out this week as we go. We love you. We proclaim you as the true King. Let our lives be shaped by that reality. Pray this in your name. Amen.